Hello, my name is Graham Allcott, and I'm the founder of Think Productive, one of the world's leading providers of productivity training and coaching. And I'm also the author of the book, How to Be a Productivity Ninja. But my talk today is going to be something a little bit different. So I'm going to talk about the productivity of kindness. So I set up Think Productive back in 2009. And the aim was to help people to make space for what matters. And we've done that with our work around the world for many years. And one of the privileges of doing that work is the ability, the access to get into such a range of really interesting organizations and just start to spot things around how different cultures support or hinder productivity. Now, the thing about this is, I often think that a lot of what we talk about in productivity is almost a little bit selfish, right? So the idea often, and in my book, How to Be a Productivity Ninja, talks about this a lot. It's like you against the world. It's you making your decisions, defending your boundaries in order that you have the ability to make the stuff that you really want to make, but also so you're not distracted by, teams and collaborations and all the stuff that's going on around you. And I almost think like it in some ways, it's like it's a little bit yin and yang, right? So you need that little bit of yin time to be reflective, to be listening, to be connected to your team, to be learning. And then the yang is all about the action. And in many ways, we talk a lot in productivity about that yang, about the action, about defending your sanctuary so you're able to do the work that you really want to do. But we don't necessarily talk enough about how productivity is also a game of teams as well as a game of individuals, and how we interact with other people in the world. And ultimately, how kind we are in the way that we do that really plays a role in our productivity too. So one of our values at Think Productive is trust and kindness are rocket fuel. So I'm a big believer that when you want to do any kind of transaction, whether that's a business transaction, whether that's buying something, whatever that transaction is, you start from a position of trust. If you don't have trust, there is no transaction to do, right? Otherwise, you get into this very kind of piecemeal kind of interaction. So trust is the lubrication of everything that we do in terms of teamwork, creativity, and so on. And so the idea that we need trust is really important. It kind of feels, I know Stephen Covey talks about it in 7 Habits, but it's almost like a thing that just is, it's just taken for granted that we need to have trust when we build partnerships, when we build collaborations, when we build interactions. But I think we can up our game in terms of trust by focusing on kindness. And I've been on a mission for a couple of years now to really bring this to the fore in my own work. I'm actually writing a book about the subject of kindness in leadership and how kindness can help. But I think, noticing that kindness can lead on to the kind of trust that we need to really fuel productivity is a really big thing. So don't see this as an either or a choice where it's like I can either be kind or I can get my head down and be productive. What we need to think of this as is this is the fuel for our productivity. So some of our productivity is heads down on our own, defending our boundaries. And some of our productivity is actually getting out there, working with other people and, helping other people to help us to make things happen as well. I just put my contact details on the screen there. I'll share a bit more of that at the end. And then those are my various different books. So Productivity Ninja being the most well-known. We did a study version of that. We've just released this book, How to Have the Energy, with myself and nutritionist Colette Hennigan. So it's all about how to eat to have the best energy for productivity. And then How to Fix Meetings, that comes out in May 2021. That's with Hayley Watts, who's one of the colleagues of mine, one of the ninjas at Think Productive. So we talk a lot in How to Be a Productivity Ninja about the 9 characteristics. The 9 characteristics of the productivity ninja that will make you more productive, more effective in your work. And these are really 9 different lenses to look at your work through. Some of these themes and concepts will be very familiar to you, right? So the idea of stealth and camouflage, being deliberately offline, I guess it's kind of akin to what Cal Newport would talk about in deep work. He talks about monk mode, stealth mode, very kind of similar kind of concepts. The idea of Zen-like calm, getting everything out of your head, probably very familiar with that from the work of David Allen and other people. And lots of the ideas there, I'm sure, are themes that are coming up as part of this summit. So being ruthless, weapon savvy, so being really informed and intentional around how you use tech, how you use tools, how you use calendar, all those kind of different things. But I want to focus on one of the characteristics that's probably a bit less well known in the productivity world and a bit more kind of unique to my book, which is the idea that a productivity ninja is a human and not a superhero. So what does it mean to be human at work? Let's start with that. So I think sometimes we have, and I've seen this in organizations I've worked with around the world, there's a lot of companies I've worked with who it seems like their approach is to deny people's humanness, right? So you show up as this kind of idealized version of who you'd like to be, you put on different clothes, you act and think in a different way at work as you would do in the rest of your life. And I think that completely negates good productivity. I think we get good productivity when we're able to show up to work being our full human selves. And why? Because one of the biggest barriers to productivity is procrastination. And where does procrastination come from? It comes from the very most human parts of our humanness, right? So it comes from the lizard brain. It comes from our irrationalities, our biases, the baggage that we carry, however well we carry it. So we have to really think about this idea of being human at work as being really central. And of course, when we get into more collaborative ways of working, then it's really important that that communication is authentic. And it's really important that people value each other for who they really are. So there's a lot made of different human traits and stuff, but I want to just focus on one particular part of the human experience that I want to really debunk as part of this talk. I'm calling this the ruthlessness fallacy, or you could think of it as the business baddie myth, right? So when we think about business, when we think about entrepreneurship, a lot of the role models that we would think about are people who are seen to be in some way acting in a way that's evil or bad, or they're going to step over you to get ahead. They have very negative human character traits, and this is seen as a good thing, right? So if you think about Donald Trump, who has been probably the biggest, most talked about business figure because of his political career in the last, let's say, 5 or 6 years. If you think about Steve Jobs, one of the most important business figures, of course, but a lot of that talk when his biography came out was how he would throw things across the room and how he would tear one employee down in front of the entire organization in an all hands meeting. And I've spoken to people who've been in some of those meetings too, and told some of those stories that he truly did live up to that stereotype a lot of the time. If you think about the TV shows and the movie portrayals, we think about things like Wall Street or The Wolf of Wall Street or Shark Tank or Dragon's Den, all of these shows, The Apprentice, the way we think about business, the way we think about work tends to be through this lens of, the most successful people are the baddies. They're the ones who are not afraid to rub other people up the wrong way, or to compromise the success of other people in order to fuel their own success. And I just think this is wrong. I think we need to really just dispel this business baddie myth from our culture. Why are these stories so compelling? Why do we think so highly of these stories of business baddies who are evil and get their own way? And I think it's because they're the outliers. It's not because they're the typical way that people operate in business. It's because they're the outliers. And I think there's a small part of all of us deep down in our psyche that has that curiosity. What would it have been like in our lives if we'd behaved like Donald Trump or Steve Jobs? And that's an uncomfortable thought, right? But I think all of us have, within us that curiosity to say, these rules are important, these rules of humanity and courtesy, these things that we live by day to day. We think these things are important. We're going to continue to do them. But what if we didn't? And I just think it's always there in our curiosity. And so that's what I think for me makes these stories so fascinating to a lot of people, is because they're the outliers, they're the exceptions to the rule. But the things that happen day to day in so many businesses, which is, people relating well to each other, people being compassionate, people being caring, it's not sexy. It doesn't make the news. It doesn't inspire us with curiosity and wanting to hear more. And so, I'm a big believer that the world is driven by leaders, by people in teams, by organizations that at their heart do care about people, that do want the best for people, and are cooperative in their approach rather than ultimately cutthroat in their approach. And we just don't hear these stories often enough because they're just not as interesting as those compelling business baddie myth narratives. So let's talk about some of the real heroes in business. So at the top left here, we've got Mary Portas. In the UK, she's known as the Queen of Shops, retail guru, has a great TED talk about kindness, and really focusing on kindness from the perspective of how you deal with your employees, but also how you deal with your customers. Top right there, Tony Hsieh, sadly passed away last year. And his whole raison d'etre with Zappos was about the culture of kindness and building, this human connection within his organization. Oprah Winfrey on the bottom right there, just bags of empathy, just known as someone who connects very fully with people. And then bottom left, Nick Jenkins, very interesting one, because he was actually in the TV show Dragon's Den in the UK. He's the founder of Moonpig, very well-known online card company. And he didn't last very long in Dragon's Den. And I actually interviewed him for my podcast, Beyond Busy. And during that interview, I said to him, well, it seemed like your approach in Dragon's Den was to, even when you weren't going to give someone an investment, you were giving them advice and you were helping them, and really being generous in the way that you interacted with the hopefuls in Dragon's Den. Was that a conscious thing? And he said, well, no, it wasn't a conscious thing. It's just how I have lived my life and how I have done business. And that's why I'm successful. And so whilst that was a really good approach for him building his business, didn't make good TV, and he didn't last very long in that show. In the middle there, John Timpson, who will probably be well known to UK audiences here, less so probably elsewhere in the world, but his shop, Timpson's, very famous for their approaches around kindness. They have a really good policy of recruiting ex-offenders, and they're they're not shy about saying, okay, so this is a good thing that we're doing. We're helping people who are really struggling to get jobs and get back into work. We're helping them into jobs. But also the reason we do that is a productive business decision, because we know that if we hire those people and do a good job, they will be so loyal to us, they will not leave, and they'll do a great job. And so they have this very strong loyalty, very strong culture built around kindness and using kindness almost strategically. They own a number of holiday properties which are available to employees to go on holiday in. They're known for having really good benefits, really good autonomy, flexibility, passing a lot of the decision-making around pricing and various other things down to the very lowest levels of customer service employee, so that it's like, yeah, we trust you, go and do your job. We're getting out of the way. Very kind, very compassionate management approach, and has been very successful for their business. And of course, we can't talk about kindness in leadership without talking about Jacinda Ardern. I'll leave that quote up on the screen. But I think what's interesting is whenever I've talked about kindness in leadership with people, often the biggest pushback I get is not from the men, but it's from some women, from certain women who have generally come across a book, and the book is called Why the Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office. And so what's really interesting about the gender aspects of kindness is that women have been told for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, if you want to succeed in business, you have to take on this very kind of masculine demeanor and approach. You have to have this very masculine leadership style, because that's the culture. And I think the culture is just changing underneath us. And I think actually, when we think about the next 50 years of work and how machines will take an ever increasing part of the workload, I think what's going to be left behind and what's going to be a big driver for personal success is going to be your interpersonal skills, your ability to collaborate with other people, manage other people, lead other people. That will really come to the fore, I think, in the next 50 years or so. And what we need in that is empathy. And so I would say that we need to get rid of this book and this whole idea of why nice girls don't get the corner office, switch this around and say, actually, we need a new book. And the book should be called something like Be More Jacinda. And we need to take on this much more empathetic, much more open, sometimes vulnerable management and leadership style in order to really connect with other people and communicate the things that we want to get done. So I don't think this is just, woolly words. I think there's a real productive, outcome to kindness, as well as it just making places a really great place to work. I mean, it's something that I guess, instinctively always known and always done. I've been on more of a mission to share it in the last few years, but a little while ago, one of my first colleagues in my first ever job, when I'd moved down to London, I was running this charity in London, my number 2 there, quite recently just left a comment on one of my LinkedIn posts and said, hey, you used to do this in your first ever job, which was we used to have people move to London to start with this charity. And I always used to say to them, when you're in the middle of this job, it's going to be busy. So if you want to move your start date back a couple of weeks to make sure you can move and get settled in and just, know where you're at in London, then instinctively, then you'll be able to throw yourself into work in a much better way. And that always paid off for me, because I kind of feel like once you allow people that space to be human, and you allow people that space to just get their personal lives together, then once they're at work, they're much more able to focus on the stuff that really matters then. So I think trust and kindness for our rocket fuel has become a bit of a mantra for us at Think Productive. There's a whole bunch of ways that we live this out. I'm going to talk about a couple of them in a minute, just in terms of my own sort of mantras and styles. But it's worth saying that I think culture can also be in the fabric of how you operate. So Think Productive has run a 4-day week for really the best part of 10 years. We have duvet days written into people's contracts. So if you just wake up and you just, you're not quite at it mentally, then we have, duvet days where you can just call up and say, look, I'm not feeling great today. I'm just going to have a day off. I'm not sick, but I just need a day just to recuperate and sort of refresh my mojo and all that kind of thing. So that's all kind of written into the contract. We're a very open, transparent kind of culture. We involve people in the decision making a lot. We want to trust people a lot. And I think all of this really stems from just having good productivity practices, right? So like, if you're really clear about what the work is, then you can be really clear about the personal aspects of that and how people are interacting around that work as well. And to me, that's a really great way, the clarity around the work and then kindness around people strips out a lot of the politics and a lot of the annoyances and frustrations, I think, that people have in a lot of team kind of situations. So really, here's the central thesis, right? Is that when you're kind, when you go out of your way to promote kindness, when your interactions are kind, it builds empathy. And the more you do this, it's like a habit, right? So the more you're kind in moments, the more you're looking for the next moments to be kind. And when other people start to do that too, because it rubs off, then it's like everybody has their antennae out looking for the ways to connect with people. Everyone's looking for who might be struggling. Everyone's looking for who might be stuck. Everyone's looking for who might have something big going on in their personal life, and that's what's affecting their work. Everyone's just aware that there's a humanity to people, as well as the tasks that they're there to perform. So kindness leads to empathy. Kindness allows us to tap into this much more empathetic side of ourselves. And the more you have that empathy, the more it builds trust, right? So the more you have trust, the easier it is to make decisions, the easier it is to really take a big leap of faith. The easier it is in meetings to be creative and to volunteer what might feel like a less reliable idea, or maybe it's a rubbish idea, but let me put it out there. You need people to have that level of confidence to be able to share that stuff. Particularly if it's like a group think where everybody's thinking the same about something, and there's one person in the room who actually has a different point of view. If they don't share that, it might be a really vital point of view, right? So you need trust, to really allow people to step up to the plate in that way, and that comes from psychological safety. So this is a term that you've heard a lot of organizational psychologists talk about, and it's become very popular in recent years. But essentially, psychological safety is about saying, I feel able to contribute, I feel able to be seen, I feel able to be part of the discussion here and have my opinions heard. And having that sense that you can do your work without judgment, and having that sense that you can do your work in a way that really is most fitting to you, is a thing that is very hard to it's very hard to quantify, and it's very hard to imagine that happening under the leadership of someone like Steve Jobs, right? There was no psychological safety at Apple because you would run that risk that everything that you would do and everything that you would stand for would be torn apart. Now, he ruled in a very different way, but actually that idea of psychological safety is really critical to the way most cultures and the way most organizations will run. And it's worth saying that this isn't just about being nice, right? So there's a huge difference between the idea of being nice and being kind. So, essentially nice is trying to avoid conflict. And there's a huge part of our human brain, the lizard brain, that wants to avoid conflict. Whereas kind is more about truth and grace together, right? So truth and grace together. So when you're kind, you're not going to shirk the difficult truths. You're not going to work around these things and just say, oh yeah, no, it was fine, you're going to say, listen, there's something that I really need to talk to you about. This thing didn't go too well. You're going to say the things that feel uncomfortable, but you're going to be able, through kindness, to do this in a way that really feels good for the person and feels like it's for the person rather than feels like an attack on the person. So that's a really crucial difference, the nice versus kind. Nice, I think, is generally weak, and kind is generally strong. So you have to really, know the difference between nice and kind. If you think about in a meeting, often, when it comes to your turn to give your opinion on something in a meeting, if you're being nice, you just say, "Oh yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's fine," and then you'll get out of the meeting, and then behind your back, you'll bitch about the person, right? And it'll just, feel like one of those things that you probably should have stood up for in the time, but you didn't. Whereas nice is about being respectful. You can disagree, and nice is about valuing the difference and valuing other people's perspectives on stuff, even when it's in conflict and even when you disagree. So really, this is about making space for what matters. This is really my definition of productivity. It's about making space for what matters. And, I think in recent years, I've definitely come to the conclusion that, yes, I want to do work that really matters, and our work really matters, and a sense of satisfaction around our work really matters. But also using work as the conduit to build community, to build a sense of satisfaction, to build the experiences that shape life, that matters too. And that's much more enjoyable and much more satisfying if we do it in a way that embraces our humanness and embraces the propensity that we all have and the potential that we all have to be really kind. So I'm going to talk about 5 intentional acts of kindness. These are things that you can bring into your work that will really surface the humanness and also drive productivity, because that's what this is all about, right? 5 intentional acts of kindness. The reason I say intentional acts of kindness, you've probably heard the terminology before, random acts of kindness. And random acts of kindness are great, don't get me wrong. But I think also we can be more intentional. There's no point being really kind, paying the parking ticket for the person who lives down your street who you don't know, if you're not going to be kind to the people that you live with and the people around you and your family. So intentional acts of kindness, being kind to the people closest to you. So intentional acts of kindness. I'm going to start with human, not superhero. So one of my 9 productivity ninja characteristics. So really embracing that humanness, embracing the idea that, hey, if I'm going to be someone who is productive and I'm not a machine, then sometimes I'm going to get stuff wrong. Human, not superhero is about saying we screw this stuff up sometimes. And so with that in mind, celebrating those failures and celebrating them in the way that says, do you know what these failures are? They're a sign and a reminder that we got it right all those other times, and we're human. Despite being human, we got that stuff right. So if we occasionally get it wrong, we should use that as the celebration and celebration of the magic of the fact that, hey, look at all the other stuff we did really well. Isn't that remarkable that we were able to do all that other stuff really well? So my boss at Think Productive, Elena, who's our MD and the boss of the company, and when she sends me an email saying I've screwed something up, I will send something back saying, "Hooray, you're human after all! Isn't that brilliant?" And it just takes the guilt and the edge off that entire conversation, and then we're able to talk much more productively about, okay, what needs to happen to fix this. I worked with a brilliant boss early in my career, and her catchphrase was, "I don't mind if you screw up as long as you own up and clear up." And, ultimately, we need to recognize that there are human feelings involved when someone screws up, but we want to get beyond those as quickly as possible to be able to fix it. And the best way to do that is diffuse it with a bit of humor, bit of humanity. And that's a really great way to get past that and move on and fix the thing that went wrong. This is my personal mantra: people first, work second, always. There's a blog post that I wrote about this, which I'll put in the links as well. But people first, work second, always. So if I get one of those text messages that's like, "Hey, Graham, there's this thing going on in my life and it's really difficult. I'm not sure whether, if I'm going to be able to work today." My response is always to say, look, the rule is people first, work second, always. If you need to take the whole day off, take it. If you need to take the whole week off, take it. I don't want to put any pressure on you right now. I want to fix the things in your life. And I know that once someone has fixed the things in their life and they're engaged in their work, they go all in, right? And so there's something about this where if you're sat there trying to do your emails and something really bad has happened, you've gone through a breakup or someone's really ill or, the cat's really sick or whatever it is, you're just going to be thinking about that stuff. You're not going to be engaged in your work. Your attention will not be full on the work that you're doing. And so why bother, right? Isn't it better to sort those things out first? So people first, work second, always. And what's really interesting about this is it becomes reciprocal, right? So the thing to note is that like there will be times where you need to put work second and put your own life first, right? And it's in those moments that everybody else's job is to step up and cover your back, right? So I'm going to be away for a week, but here's what I was doing. Here's what I need you guys to do, and it's their job to step up. And the great thing is when you're then back at work, you remember that. And so it's your job to step up too when someone else needs you. And it's worth saying that it's always somebody's always. So there's always somebody on the team that needs more support, even if it's not they need time off or need time away. But there's always someone who is struggling. And it's always your job to be looking out for who that is and helping them too. So people first, work second, always. And about meetings. So Think Productive, my company has a workshop called Fixing Meetings. And I've actually got a book coming out with Hayley Watts this year called How to Fix Meetings. So a couple of things that I think can be really helpful to make meetings more kind, more human, and ultimately then more collaborative, creative, productive. Nancy Klein wrote a book called The Thinking Environment. And in this book, she talks about the idea of opening rounds. So when you come into a meeting, you start the meeting by going around the table and everyone says, their name, how they're feeling, one thing that's going well. Just short little questions like that. The thing about that is it allows everybody to speak at the beginning. So nobody's first time of speaking is them saying, I don't agree, right? Everybody knows, everyone's an expert in their own life. So everyone's able to come into the room and say how they're feeling and one thing that's going well. So everyone's the expert on those things. It breaks the seal. It allows you to contribute early. And then you feel more confident about the contributions that really matter later on in the meeting. So it takes a few minutes, but it sets the scene. It allows everyone to arrive, connect with each other on a really human level. And this is exactly the same on Zoom, right? So it's no different just because we're online. Just that moment to go around, and I do this if it's a meeting of say less than 10 or 11 people, I will do it all in the one Zoom room or in the one space. If it's a really big meeting, just have people turn to the person next to them. The point is to break the seal, build human connection. In a big group, you can't build connection between every single person at the same time. But just giving everybody that chance to speak and check in and arrive, and just have a moment to just kind of reflect on their intentions for that meeting. Really, really important before you get into the business. So it might feel like that takes 5 or 10 minutes longer. And then some of you will be sat there going, well, that's less productive. But what the point of this is that a meeting is about investing in each other's attention to get the best outcome. So it's not about how to do the meeting the quickest. It's how to do the meeting the quickest that you can also get a great result from. And that's why I think it's much more productive. And then I think there's meetings are a really interesting place in our culture and in society, because they're really the last place that we actively and openly and generously share attention with other humans. Let's just think about how important that is. I think a lot of people have missed face-to-face meetings, face-to-face interactions over the COVID period when they've been working from home. This human connection, this sense of deep listening and understanding is really vital to the human condition. It's really, really important. But meetings are not the only place that we build that window of deeper listening. I think one-to-ones are a really important and underutilized tool. It's incredible to me when I talk to managers, how many managers don't have regular one-to-ones with their people. One-to-ones for me are a space where you can say, hey, this is a time where we can really talk about you. And it means that space is in the diary. It means that you're not in this position, if you don't have those meetings, where you're sending someone an email or having a conversation where you're saying, we need to have a meeting about your performance, right? Like suddenly that person's on the back foot and defensive, and it's difficult. And it's much better if that's just a regular, ongoing, organic, cyclical, rhythmical conversation. So really important. And it's one of those things, it's a bit like, I've often found this when I've done volunteering. I've found this when I've been to counseling sessions, like all these things that you do regularly. Often the weeks where you turn up thinking, oh, I really can't see the point of this, or I've got nothing to say, those are always the best weeks, right? So sometimes when you have a one-to-one, it can feel like, well, I've got so much on, I'll just cancel this. Those are always the ones you should never cancel. So having that rhythm of these things that just allows people to just speak as them, speak on a human level, really important to build that connection. And then the final one here is a thing that Think Productive, my company, took from Brewdog, the beer company based up in Scotland. It's called Smash Shit Up. And, their main beer is called Punk IPA. They have this very kind of punk ethos. And the idea of Smash It Up is about saying there's no such thing as a sacred cow in our organization. There's nothing that is somebody's pet project that we don't judge the productivity or effectiveness of. And so, doing this, so we do this kind of once a year when we do a strategy session, is we'll really allow people free rein to say, what's not working here? What needs to change here? What do we need to smash up? What idea are we really holding on to that we don't need to keep? And so on and so forth. And this is really important because what it allows is every single person in the business has the same, has the same ability to contribute these ideas. We treat everybody the same, regardless of level, role, how long you've been there, et cetera, et cetera. Tell us what's working, tell us what's not working, right? And so doing that once a year in a really intensive way just allows us to have that mindset always. And again, it detaches the ego from a lot of these decisions so that we can say, hey, we just all agree this isn't working. I know it's your pet thing. I know it's the thing that you've spent loads of time on, but it's not working. So by just knowing that that's part of the culture, then it really allows us to take some of those decisions away from it being, oh, but we don't want to upset this person, or oh, we need to think about that. And, we're all on the same page in terms of thinking about the effectiveness of these things. So another thing I've realized from, sort of 10 or 15 years working in the field of productivity is it's astonishing to me how the amount of employees in big organizations who are not thinking about the relationship between the work they're doing right now and value, right? Value for clients, value for profit, value for, building something. People detach themselves in the work they're doing from what's the bigger mission so easily. And, it's really important for us as leaders to bring people back to that overall purpose, that overall mission that we're driving. And then, right, so for a long time, I guess I've been known as the email guy, right? So Think Productive has this workshop, Getting Your Inbox to Zero, which was kind of our biggest, most well-known workshops when we started the company. Really focuses on that kind of inbox zero approach. And we also have a lot of work that we do with companies around email culture. But yeah, kind emails. So email is a very flat medium, right? So you have to work quite hard to get kindness into email. But here's the thing, it's free and it takes 2 minutes. And, one of the barriers to kindness that I see a lot is busyness and people rushing and people being frenetic. And so sometimes the best way to think about email in a kind way is just to slow it down a little bit and just create a little bit more space. And then it's like, okay, so cool. I could start with something really courteous, something really kind, something really funny, and just build connection with the person before I get into the main, sort of bulk of the email. And, just that sense that someone has thought about you independently of needing to do anything is really powerful. So, if you just see something like a TED talk or, book or something, and it just really sparks in your mind the idea of, oh, my colleague would really love that, just send it to them. And it just takes you half a minute. But for that person, you have no idea what that means for them to just get this email saying, oh, so and so was thinking of me just for a moment, and that's a really powerful human connection that you can build. So again, just kind of astonishing to me the way people see stuff like networking as being about, I need to talk to people about what I can get from them and what I've learned over the years. And I think I had it very instinctively, but I've definitely seen the value of it over the years, is that just if you're just generous, stuff good happens to you back, right? It's a virtuous circle thing. And just the more you put good stuff out into the world, the more good stuff comes back to you. Now, the thing about this topic is that I think, I hope I made the point earlier that nice and kind are two different things. I see nice as weak. I see kind as strong. So we shouldn't be looking at this as like a fluffy thing that we don't have the time to do. We don't want to think about it in that way. But how do we sell this to organizations? I think often the question that comes up, I think it's the wrong question, but the question comes up is like, what's the return on investment here? Like, what's the ROI? And I think there's a multitude of ways to answer this. There's a lot of scientific research in the last few years, particularly coming out of the University of Sussex, very close to where I live here in the UK, that is talking about the psychological benefits, the effects of kindness, actually both psychological and sociological as well, societal benefits of kindness too. So there's a lot of evidence to suggest that kindness drives happiness and well-being. The kinder you are, the happier you are as a person. But also that kinder cultures tend to also be generally happier. And generally, there's a greater sense of well-being through kindness. So there's definitely also a lot of research that talks about things like collaboration and things like communication and teamwork being enabled when people are kinder, when the leader that they are working with is known as being kind or is exhibiting kind traits, then the sense of teamwork, camaraderie, creativity, all of that stuff goes up through kindness. But it is one of those questions that we need to think about. How do we sell this? And it's similar to a thing I saw of Gary Vaynerchuk. Someone said to Gary, what's the ROI? And Gary said, well, what's the ROI of your mum? So if you think about it in that way, this is just something that we inherently know brings us so many benefits. It's just, in some ways, yes, we could measure it, but actually, why would we, right? We need to ask a very different question, which is what's the alternative here? And actually, kindness is always, for me, something that's going to be the thing that drives that trust and then becomes the rocket fuel of our work. So I'm about done. So I'm just going to give you a couple of things before I finish. So if you have liked this, I'm doing some regular writing around kindness and productivity over on my weekly email, which is called Rev Up for the Week. You can sign up for that at grahamallcott.com. It goes out every Sunday, and the idea is it's a productive or positive thought for the week ahead. So head to grahamallcott.com and you can sign up for that. I mentioned earlier my new book coming out, which is called How to Fix Meetings with Hayley Watts. It's available right now for pre-order on Amazon. And I also released this book this year, How to Have the Energy, which is the one about eating to have better fuel in your brain for productivity. So check out How to Have the Energy as well. I also run a very popular productivity podcast called Beyond Busy. So Beyond Busy, we interview a whole range of different guests around the intersections between productivity, work-life balance, happiness. And we recently just had Seth Godin on the show. We've got Cal Newport on the show. So some really interesting guests, and I love doing the podcast. But you can sign up to Beyond Busy wherever you get your podcasts, or just go to getbeyondbusy.com if you want to find out more. And my company is Think Productive. So we run a whole range of productivity workshops. We run everything from getting your inbox to zero through to walking people through my book, How to Be a Productivity Ninja. Stuff about meetings. We do one-to-one coaching. So a whole bunch of stuff there that you can access, particularly if you're lucky enough to have a training budget within your team and you want to bring us in to help your team. We work all around the world. We work virtually. And we'd love to hear from you. So thinkproductive.com, and you can find out more about that. And then just finally, my details just to leave on the screen. So I'd love you to connect. I'm just Graham at thinkproductive.co.uk on the email, and also on Instagram at Graham Allcott. I am on Twitter, but I never check it. And I'm also on LinkedIn, but do check me out there. And I think for me, what's really interesting over the last year or so with everything that we've experienced with COVID is it feels like it's brought out in life a really strong sense of kindness and community, and we've noticed the interconnectedness of our work and our lives much more than ever before. And I've often said that productivity is about making space for what matters, and it feels like kindness is one of those things that really matters right now. So thank you for clicking on this and checking it out. That probably means that you have some interest in kindness too. And I thank you for that. Spread some kindness and it'll pay dividends. So thank you for listening, and I'd love to connect.